Thank you, Lee, for a brief introduction and for going through the housekeeping rules. So once again, welcome everyone to today's webinar. Just to quickly introduce myself, my name is Jans Babkiewicz, and I'm a BOHS certified occupational hygienist working for Syngenta, and I'm also the regional BOHS coordinator for the East Midlands and Yorkshire area. So today we're talking about biological hazards, and let me just say what a great turnout we have for this webinar today. I can see more than 135 people have joined us today, and I hope this number will go up as we continue. So biological hazards, undoubtedly, it's a fundamental part of occupational hygiene practice. We all know that workplace hazards can be chemical, physical, and of course biological. However, health and safety professionals and occupational hygienists often shy away from them. Biological hazards are often thought of as something special and standalone discipline that maybe healthcare professionals or infection control specialists would deal with. However, with the beginning of the COVID pandemic, many workplaces suddenly realized that occupational hygienists possess a perfect skill set to control exposure to biological hazards, which of course SARS-CoV-2 is. In my opinion, no other professional has a better skill set to address exposure to biological hazards than occupational hygienists. In fact, occupational hygienists and other health and safety professionals dealt with exposure to biological hazards well before the pandemic. In the UK, exposure to biological hazards is governed by the Control of Substances Hazardous to Health Regulations 2002. All those bits of regulations related to risk assessment, control, training, and monitoring equally apply to both chemical and biological hazards. The most well recognized biohazards in occupational hygiene circles are Legionella and SARS-CoV-2. However, the UK HSE publishes the approved list of biological agents with hundreds of other biological agents to which COSH regulations apply. So long story short, biological hazards are nothing new to the practice of occupational hygiene, and we should not shy away from it. And to help us to do that, we have a subject matter expert with us, Professor Gustavo Rezende de Souza. Gustavo is a professor and a specialist in occupational hygiene at the University of Sao Paulo, Brazil. He's a certified occupational hygienist by the Brazilian Association of Occupational Hygienists. And in addition to his academic practice, he's a technical director at GV Occupational Health and Safety. Gustavo also runs several successful social media accounts focusing on the promotion of occupational hygiene. So please go check out his channels and you'll find some really good stuff there. So without further ado, please welcome Professor Gustavo.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much, Jens, for your introduction. And guys, I'm so glad, and it's an honor to take part in this event and to talk to a qualified audience present here. And by the way, I'd like to thank Jens for the invitation and congratulate him for you for the excellent occupational hygiene content shared on social media platforms. And I'd like to thank the presence of my friends from Brazil. Especially, I saw some friends here, but I'd like to thank especially my great friend, occupational hygienist Marcos Braga. Thank you, man, so much to be here. And let me introduce a little bit about myself. My name is Gustavo Rezende, and I am an occupational hygienist certified by the Occupational Hygiene Brazilian Association. And I also have a degree in science and technology from ABC Federal University. and I'm a specialist in occupational hygiene from São Paulo University, and I'm a safe work technician from Senac Santo André as well. And well, my experience is in different areas of occupational hygiene, from sample collection in the field to statistical data treatment. But well, I've been working as a consultant in occupational hygiene in the healthcare system for a long time. More specifically, at hospitals, clinics, including death insurance service and other places dedicated to human health care or relative service. And during this time, I've been working so closely with biological hazards, more especially in hazard identification and occupational risk assessment. So yeah, this topic is quite interesting for me. So and the theme of this webinar is biological hazards, identification, evaluation, and control. A very pertinent subject in view of the recent period we are experiencing in relation to COVID-19. Well, so uh, in on the next slide, I think it's not new to anyone, but for decades, there has been a symbol used universally to represent biological hazards in different situations, but especially in hospitals and health service in general, or where there's the presence of contaminated material. And well, it was created in 1966 by Charles Baldwin, an environment health engineer for Centers for Disease Control and Prevention for the famous CDC from United States. So it's a popular symbol used to represent biological hazards in different places, in different situations. And well, but here in Brazil, like in other parts of the world, there's some standards to talk about before we go deeper into the subject. For example, in labor legislation here in Brazil, we can find a definition about what are considered risks in terms of occupational hygiene. And among them, we have biological hazards. So bacteria, fungi, bacilli, parasites, protozoals, viruses, among others, are considered biological hazards in the workplace and are an object of identification, analysis, and control by occupational hygienists. However, guys, in another standard in Brazilian labor legislation as well, specific to healthcare facilities code NR32, we can find a broader definition for biological hazards, including genetically modified microorganisms, toxins, and prions. I mean, which are basically bacterial proteins. And well, in my perception in this moment, I mean, in the post-pandemic or almost post-pandemic time, depending on where you live, I think the last 2 years have been quite important for occupational hygiene professionals to look at exposures to biological risks with more interest. Because when compared to physical and chemical risks, I have the perception that we don't give the same importance as we do to other risks, at least here in Brazil, I mean. And unfortunately, today, our discussion here about biohazards, I mean, Brazil as well, are very much focused on financial compensation for exposure instead of talking about aspects of prevention of diseases caused by exposure to biological hazards and biosafe factors. And it's worth pointing out that the human being has a very own and a natural microbiota consisting of different types of microorganisms that live with us in a peaceful way, regulate different functions of our body, and even protecting us, especially the gastrointestinal tissue, the skin, the respiratory mucosa, the oral flora, among other parts of the body. And it's necessary to remember that only a small part of the microorganisms that cause disease to humans, that is, someone's have a pathogenic potential. And they are microorganisms that we are interested in evaluating and controlling in occupational hygiene. Guys, I want to make some considerations about biohazard assessment. Mainly considering some approaches for an investigative analysis to identify and assess biohazards in the work environment. And here in Brazil, talking about the regulated norm number 32 again, it establishes that biological risk is considered as the probability of exposure to microorganisms. Please, just to understand, sometimes I'm going to say biological agents, but it is biological hazards because here in Brazil we use this expression biological agents a lot instead of biological hazards. So just to keep the same understanding here, guys. I wanna consider some points to analyze here. Some valid approaches for any type of biological risk assessment. So first of all, we have make an analysis of a possible communicable disease from epidemiological data. And it's important when we think about some health sectors, particularly huge hospitals, where there's infection committees responsible for checking hospital-acquired infections. And we know how health professionals are more prone to occupational exposure. So through this approach, it's possible to correlate some infections with some kinds of biological hazards to determine activities where health professionals are more prone to occupational exposure. Okay. Second one, analyze very carefully the source of danger present in the workplace. Here we can list a few sources. For instance, different kind of objects, materials, surface, perforating materials, sick people, and even to a lesser extent, contaminated food as well. The next one is observe the situations where contact may occur between the source of exposure and the workers. Well, there are different ways to be exposed to biological hazards. The most common way is through the air, for sure, when droplets are dispersed through the air, serving as a means of locomotion for different microorganisms, especially for those living in the oral flora. And in closed environments, when air circulation is low, droplets are more able to circulate and hang in the air for a long time. So let me give you some example. Uh, Based on Stokes' law and the Cunningham correction factor, an aerosol of this size, pretty small, would take an average of 5 hours and 10 minutes to precipitate 20 centimeters. Oh, it's a quite long time. So probability to inhale the same particles is pretty high. And some researchers, as Darleman et al., point out, the viral particles remain active in significant quantities in the environment for 3 hours after their emission. And as well, it's a long time to be exposed to this kind of aerosols in the workplace. And besides that, there are a dermal risk, particularly related to dermal contact between people or contact with some kind of vector, as insects, rodents, among other potential infected animals. And well, the last one is analyze preventive measures, often called barriers, already implemented by the company. So guys, a huge problem in any kind of risk assessment, in my point of view, is we considered this kind of protection. And as I said, no matter which risk we are dealing with, but we often disconsider the effectiveness of the control measures already implemented in the workplace. And there are different ways to consider this through negative pressure ventilation with high efficiency air purification filters, normally called, high efficiency particulate air. And it's a great example, but not only this, we can consider training, safe signaling, safety procedures, and the use of personal protective equipment, PPE as well. Okay. Well, so besides that, uh, we have to consider three different variables about biological hazards. So they are, first of all, is pathogenicity, the potential to cause a pathology, disease, virulence, the intensity of damage caused, and well, here I wanna consider some things. Let me take an example. Influenza virus and Ebola virus, both are pathogenics. However, virulence is completely different between each other. So we can't put all microorganisms in the same level of damage. Yeah, we have to decide it looking for biological risk classification used in different countries, and we are going to discuss it in a few minutes. And it's important to classify in different levels of risk. It's pretty important. And well, the last one is propagation for the collectivity, how the microorganism is spread in the environment, for instance, through droplets, aerosols, blood, or other blood fluid. Yeah. And as I said, guys, the most effective way to, I think there is a mic open. Okay. And no problem, it's happening. Don't worry. And as I said, the most effective way to spread it is through the air. Then the contamination of many people becomes very easy. Yeah, so we have to consider all the possibilities. Okay. So here, in summary, we can highlight the following aspects: path transmissions, persistence of the microorganism in external environments, outside the host's body, and the estimation of severity based on the variables described: pathogenicity, virulence, and the propagation for the collectivity. Yes, all of these aspects are pretty important to consider in a biological risk assessment. And well, now I'm sharing the summary of biological risk classification used in Brazil. We have the same variables mentioned to classify biohazards. The only difference here is the addition made in the last column, where we consider the existence of prophylaxis or effective treatment possible, meaning the existence of vaccines that can prevent the disease or even the existence of medicines, procedures that make possible the treatment and the clinical follow-up of the disease. In a nutshell, we can say in a nutshell, the higher the value of the first column, the greater the danger posed by a type of microorganism. Yeah, that is the way that we use to classify biological hazards here in Brazil. It's not hard. It's a simple tool to use. And on the next slide, this is an example of biohazard classification, where we can see the name of each microorganism and the classification of each one. In the third column, there's a space to add some specific note about some of them, especially there some vaccination is available or whether the microorganism is allergic, oncogenic, or produce a toxin while inside the host organism. But yeah, looking at this chart, uh, it looks like they are all classified as two. So let me show you another example where we have different classifications. On the next slide, we can see other classification values, including Filovidry family, where there are Ebola virus and Marburg virus. And this last one is interesting because this last one is one of the most lethal viruses ever identified in human history, and it causes a very serious internal hemorrhagic fever, and it's responsible for a high level of fatalities. So it's interesting to know more about any kind of biological agents, looking for some specific specifications about it, and try to search more information about each one. And well, but now I'd like to share other standards with you guys, because here in Brazil we have some reference to use and some literature available to check. But I want to share some standards, reference, and other source of information regarding biohazard identification and analysis. And the first of these is the technical note on prevention 833 from the Spanish National Institute for Occupational Safety and Hygiene. This is called biological hazards, simplified assessment. And in general, the Spanish norms are an excellent reference, not only in Brazil, but in almost all South American countries. I don't know that there is someone from Argentina, Chile, Colombia, but I know a lot of people that have been using this reference so much. And well, basically, we have the same classification parameters already mentioned according to the Brazilian legislation. The risk groups are divided into four classifications, and the higher the value, the greater the capacity to cause disease and the transmissibility of microorganisms, besides the fact that no effective treatment and prophylaxis measures are known. Okay. And well, also after the final biohazard classification, yeah, there's a brief flow chart. And by the way, sorry guys, this is in Spanish as well. I didn't translate it. Okay, sorry. But going back to the flow chart, there are some recommendations here, especially from the classification of group 2. Uh, and on the other hand, in group 1, we basically have the application of simple safety and occupational hygiene protocols. Okay, we have to take care of group 2, group 3, and especially group 4. They are more pathogenic and they have more virulence compared than the other groups. Okay. But it's important to note how there's a correlation between the classifications and the other current standards. This is something very important because it demonstrates a chain of factors that favor the management of biological hazards in different states. Another very interesting research source is the here in Brazil, we say gestes. I don't know how you pronounce in your mother language, but I don't know. It can be guests or jests. I don't know. But in Germany, we have this web page, and it's another very interesting research source about biohazard database. And in the guest on the guest website, uh, it's very well known and use it to research the occupational exposure limit of different chemicals around the world. But what not everyone knows is that there's a page to check a database with information about different types of microorganisms and exemplary activity sheets where it's possible to identify the most likely microorganisms depending on the type of task being performed. And well, on on this slide, we can see a database that can be checked. Let's look at a simple consultation example here. So clicking on the list from A to Z will open the page with data on each microorganism and also on the different types of activities. So we have a list to choose here, yeah. And well, by selecting the letter M, we will open another page with the name of different microorganisms. And with the same initial letter, okay? And among them, guys, we will select Mycobacterium tuberculosis as an example. And well, on the next slide, uh, we have some part of the information contained in the Mycobacterium tuberculosis fact sheet, but there's other data such as transmission routes, medical significance. What else? Sectors and the activities where there are maybe more exposure, the preventive measures that can be applied, and well, there is an image to show a bacterial colonization of this type of pathogen. I mean, it's a great tool to use to know more or to get more information about some type of microorganisms. Here in Brazil, we don't have this kind of information. Okay, we have some things here, but not in a deeper level as we can see here. Okay, and well, besides that, on the other page of guests website, we can see another option to check that now refers to a set of activity sheets and their potential exposures to biological hazards. And well, let's look at an example I selected uh, and it is an activity of disposal industry. Waste collection, litter service. You know, it's pretty common in different countries, so it's a great example to use here to show how we can use this kind of information from guests. Okay. Well, so we can see an example photo of this type of activity. Next, there's a list of the potential biological hazards existing in the materials handled by the works in this sector. And you know, we have different types of bacteria, fungi, and viruses as an example. And it's worth remember what I said a few minutes ago. Regardless of the source of information, we are dealing here with the most likely microorganisms according to the type of activity. Okay? In fact, guys, we have a presumption of occupational exposure. We aren't certain about what we had there. You know, it's not easy to identify biological hazards. So yeah, here we have a source of information to use to identify the most probable microorganisms in different type of activities. Okay. And well, in North America, another source is the Canadian government pathogen safety data sheet, particularly for labs work, which contain biosafe information for different types of procedures. And it's good if you work at some, you know, university, some lab, like here in ABC Federal University, we have different biolabs. And if you have this kind of sector to analyze, I recommend this site so much to consult information about biohazards in labs because we have great examples and information available to use free. So that's pretty good as well. Let me drink some water, please, because it's not easy to talk, but 1 second. Okay, let's go. Okay, but we have to use this information, okay? We have to take some action from that. So all the information cited here is used by me and my team when we prepare biological risk assessment for the development of the risk management program, which is currently here in Brazil the most comprehensive program for the prevention of accidents and occupational disease existing in the Brazilian legislation. So, guys, we seek to specifically identify each type of microorganisms and its respective risk category in order to prioritize control measures in relation to the most aggressive microorganisms present in the workplace. So I use all this information to prepare my biological risk assessment, but I use it to management the exposures in the workplace. Okay, it's pretty good to have a lot of information available to consult, but what we are going to do with this information, we have to take some action by then. It's pretty important. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you have this information if you don't do nothing, and it is, and we have this possibility working as occupational hygienists professionals, because we have to work not only chemical hazards or noise or heat or vibration. We have to use this information to management exposure to biological hazards. It's pretty important, guys. And by the way, I'd also like to share some experience that we developed me at Federal ABC University, where I got my degree. I have had the opportunity to work on some research project with my colleagues, Diego Marin and my friend Reinaldo Morelli, to monitor the occupational exposure of some workers to biological hazards. And we are using a sampling pump, typically used to quantify chemical agents. And it's operating in a flow rate of 4 liters per minute, with a bottom-type particle separator with a collection efficiency curve of 100 micrometers for the inhalable fraction according to ISO 7708. And as you can see in this photo, in this picture, monitoring uh, is being done in different environments. I mean, especially in some labs on the university campus. And it is an individual monitoring and not at a fixed point. Unfortunately, here in Brazil, there's still no specific method for this type of sampling, but we are analyzing which is the behavior of occupational exposures, depending on the type of activity and the other factors. However, I need to point out that there's no established occupational exposure limit for biological agents or biological hazards, because there's no homogeneous dose response relationship defined as there are for other types of risks. Okay. And on this slide, we can see some characteristics of the parameters used, such as the flow, the standard in accordance with ISO 7708 for inhalable fraction, the low interference by the direction and the speed of the wind, and as well as the reduction of the effects caused by the accumulation of static electricity. So, guys, it has been a great way to determine the exposure to biological hazards using an individual monitoring. As I said, there is no method available here in Brazil to do that, but it's an approach or a way to get more accuracy or more good data to take some action or to do something in relation to provide personal protective equipment, safety protocols, and other measures. Okay. And well, guys, thank you so much for the opportunity again. As I said, it was an honor to be here sharing some of the experience that we have been developing in Brazil, among other information related to biological hazards. Congratulations to everyone at BOHS. Here in Brazil, we usually say boss. Okay, I don't know is it correctly, but for the excellent webinars organized. Once again, thank you to Jens for the invitation. And I also leave my email contacts and my social networks, where I often post about occupational hygiene. And if I can, I would I'd also like to leave a message in Portuguese for my friends from Brazil, or for those who watch this video later. Muito obrigado por prestigiarem o evento e sigam trabalhando pelo desenvolvimento de uma higiene ocupacional de excelência, meus amigos. What I said was thank you very much for attending the event and continue working towards the development of excellent occupational hygiene around the world. And now I make myself available to everyone for any comments. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you very much, Gustavo, for this insightful presentation on biological hazards. It was great to hear about the variety of resources available out there to assist occupational hygienists in exposure assessment. I hope your presentation helped our viewers to realize that fundamental principles of occupational hygiene apply in the same manner to biological hazards as to any other form of environmental agents. We have plenty of resources available to recognize the biological hazard. We have methods for quantitative assessments of biological agents, and you showed us that we have ready-to-use solutions for controlling exposure. And you also touched on various international standards and biohazard classification schemes. Although somewhat similar, this will vary from country to country, so it is important to check with your local health and safety authority for the most up-to-date guidance. So for those practicing in the UK, you should refer to the biohazard containment levels 2, 3, and 4 outlined in the COSH regulations and to the approved list of biological agents published by the UK HSE. But to conclude, I think with some additional investment into researching this topic of biohazards, I believe many of us already possess the right skill set to undertake this type of assessment. And this presentation certainly gives us the confidence to explore this area of occupational hygiene. So thank you very much, Gustavo.
Thank you. And it was so important to remember that you have to consult the standards of your country to check it's possible to use this kind of information, because here in Brazil, in our legislation, it's possible in some situations, but for sure you have to consult your regulation, your standards to be in compliance with the law. Yeah.
Excellent. Right. So we have some time to answer questions, and we have a lot of them coming through, and even more after we finish. So I'll do my best to ask them all. It might take a bit longer than we have allocated time, but we'll try to answer as many as possible. So if you don't have a chance to stay for the entirety of Q&A, please watch us later on YouTube to see all answers to Q&A. And I'd like to take opportunity. Sorry, I'd like to take opportunity to ask the first question, Gustavo. But you already answered it. But I was hoping to ask if there's any exposure standards, for biological hazards, because as hygienists, you always want to have some sort of benchmark to compare against. You got your numbers, you got your data. So now what? Let's compare it to something. So I was quite disappointed that there is nothing yet. But maybe you can tell us a bit more if there's something coming in the pipeline. Is there any projects to implement any standards?
Yeah. Well, we have been consulting some information to analyze if there is some standard or some kind of method available or official available to use, because I mean, yes, for measure chemical hazards in the workplace, we often use NIOSH method, OSHA's method, ASTM method. So yeah, we have a lot of them to use. And in Europe and in Asia, we found some information about new protocols, new methods to use. But for sure, we don't have a dose response in terms of exposure to biological hazards. And okay, we have some infectious dose in the literature, but it's not an occupation exposure level to use. And well, I think maybe this pandemic time has been a great opportunity to think more about this kind of possibility. Not, as I said, not to develop an occupation exposure limit for them, but just to think about new ways to analyze biological hazards in the workplace. Because in the most of time we used uh, qualitative approach, and okay, there is no problem to use uh, uh, these kind of tools. However, I think we can go to a next level. We can do more, and I think this research is one of the ways to provide new methods and new parameters to use by occupational hygiene professionals. It's not easy. Yes, it's not easy because we have to develop new studies in different work environments, and we had a lot of limitations to go to different companies to develop new research there. Sorry, but I'm optimistic, in terms of what we have doing, and as soon as possible, we are going to have new approach to use, and some good things are coming in terms of biological risk assessment.
Thank you, Gustavo. Just to confirm housekeeping rules, if we can all keep mics off, and if you have any questions, just drop them in the chat box and I will read it out to Gustavo so we make sure your question is addressed. So I'll try to address those questions that were submitted during the presentation. And the first question was from Kevin, who asked, what respiratory protective equipment do you specify for healthcare workers treating confirmed and suspected COVID-19 patients and patients in other parts of the hospital?
I got it. At least here in Brazil, we use PFF2. It's equivalent to N95 in US. Okay, so we have to use some facial respirators, and it use filters to block microorganisms, regardless of the type. So it can be a bacteria, viruses, but we can't use popular masks, you know, like that kind of masks that we have been using on the streets, you know. No, we have to use PPE. So N95 is the minimum, or at least that you have to use at hospitals, clinics, or you know, every place where we have to provide this kind of protective for the workers.
Excellent. Thank you, Gustavo. Next question from William, and the question is, what type of sampling, such as sampling methods, equipment selection, would you recommend for typical office, healthcare building, manufacturing facilities, and more? In my experience, everyone measures and samples differently. So the question about sampling methods, yeah.
Yes, it's a great issue. Well, to measure biological hazards, we have to use some equipment to measure it in a fixed point. It's possible here in Brazil as well. We use an equipment, and it's used in a specific point to collect microorganisms there. Or we can use this new approach. Okay. Through this method, regardless where people are working, we can use a simple sample. It is a gelatin membrane. Yes, we put it inside the bottom. Yeah, and we connect it in the pump, and we select the flow rate of 4 liters per minute. But we don't collect it for a long time because, for example, NIOSH's manual recommends you have to collect 17 or 75% of the total of the time work, you know. But for biological hazards, we have a sensitive membrane there. So we have to collect each sample using just 30 minutes. Yes. Each 30 minutes we have to substitute the membrane. So it is a limitation of the method of this new approach. But as I said, regardless of the source or the work environment, you can use the same kind of equipment. Yes, it's not changed. And about all the websites that I brought here, or I gave here, yeah, all of them are applied in different kind of activities. So we can use it in different jobs, in different tasks. So, well, we don't have any kind of limitation in terms of application, okay?
Thank you, Gustavo. And I think building up on this answer to this question, we have a question from Johnny, who asks if there is an occupational hygiene method to sample and evaluate the COVID-19 virus at the workplace.
No, I don't know. We have search, you know. We have some research about that. You know, you can find different methods available to use, but not something that we can check or find in on NIOSH web page, for example, to use officially. Yeah. But this method that I mentioned, it's capable to get SARS-CoV-2 as well. But the method used in the microbiologic lab is different to analyze bacteria and virus, because the extraction of this kind of microorganisms is different, is different each other. So yeah, we are able to use for SARS-CoV-2, but we have to take care of some factors as the level of humidity in the air, the speed of the air. So there are different situations that can make it difficult, to collect, especially SARS-CoV-2. But in Brazil and in South America in general, I don't know a specific method to analyze SARS-CoV-2. We have been using this an official method to collect this biological agent as well.
Thank you, Gustavo. We have few more minutes left to answer questions, and to give you a slight break from talking, I have few questions here that I think I'll be able to answer myself. I have one question from Fiona, and she's asking, is there something similar database for Ireland and UK? And I think she refers to the Justice database, the German the Justice database, and we can say that we do have something similar. So UK HSE has a web page called Biosafety Resources, and they provide guidance on laboratories, on biological hazards in laboratories and healthcare, sewage, on Legionella, and general occupational hygiene guidance. So maybe not as detailed as Justice database, but there is resource offered by the UK HSE. And another question we have from Mohammed, who asked, what will be control recommendations if biological hazard bacteria found in cooling tower? And that is something that a water treatment company can help you with. So control of Legionella is primarily done through chemical dosing regime. If it's a cooling tower, then it's adding chemicals to the water stream to kill any bacteria. So adding biocides and other chemical elements. But if we talk about domestic systems, that it would be a program of regular flushing and making sure water is distributed at high enough temperature that any bacteria is killed. Okay, 2 more minutes, so maybe we will be able to squeeze another question. And there's a question from Alessandra, and I think it's a great question to close this meeting. Have you got any suggestion for a provider of more in-depth courses on biological hazards? I'm looking for a few days course, maximum a couple of weeks.
Well, yes, it's a great question because, we don't have the same number of courses offered about biological hazards as we have for the other ones. So, yeah, in Portuguese, we have some options here. In Brazil, I offer this kind of course here in Portuguese for sure. And it was one of the first courses offered in Brazil. We didn't have an course about it before mine. And well, in English, we have some things to check in in Irish as well. We have some books, especially about COVID-19 and other information about biological hazards as well. So NIOSH provides some course about that. I think we can find something out in 8I8A agents as well from United States of America, because If I'm not wrong, they have been offering some course about that. And well, what else? Let me see. I don't know if you have something in UK, yes, but as I said, it's not common to find. Here in Brazil, we have other public institutions that offer this kind of course, but it is offered by universities to nurses, doctors, for a specific public, not to occupational hygienists professionals. So it's hard to find it. But it's my suggestions, okay? And as I said, we have different different websites and pages to consult, and through that you can find uh, online course, free online course, and other webinars and information about biological hazard. But if I can give some recommendation, my piece of advice is CDC website, NIOSH website to find some information about that. And it's available for everybody. So yes, it's a great way to get knowledge about this issue.
Thank you, Gustavo. And I think we always get this question at the end of these webinars. People are hungry for knowledge. Where I can get more.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
in the UK, I would recommend to check out Health and Safety Laboratory. I think they offer some courses on biological hazards, but there is also a level 2 course on prevention and control of infection that is free of charge the last time I checked, but it's only available to those who live in England. It is through the Future Learn website, and I know that it was available at least a year ago when I checked it, so may be worth checking it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we're running out of time, so we will move on to concluding this webinar. Once again, thanks to everyone for attending this webinar today, and I hope you found the information provided here useful. Thanks to our speaker, Professor Gustavo, for all the effort put into preparing this presentation. Please reach out to him on LinkedIn and other social media accounts for further information. And of course, thank you, Lee, for helping us organize this event. I wish you all the best, and I'm looking forward to seeing you soon at our upcoming events. Goodbye now.
Goodbye, people. Thank you so much.